Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm the Campaign Marketing Manager here at eLearning Brothers. Today we're going to be talking about how to improve company culture with your training program. It's going to be a great session. We will record it. It will be sent out to everybody who has registered, so you can watch that after the fact, and feel free to share that around with anybody that you think may benefit from today's discussion. If you have questions or comments during the webinar, please use the questions panel. That's a part of the GoToWebinar control panel there, labeled questions. We'll get to as many of those as we can. We'll be asking for your feedback periodically throughout the session as well, so please put it in there so we can address it and participate in the discussion. If you have not already, please feel free to check out our community, the Rockstars community. That's at rockstars.elearningbrothers.com, and I'll stick a link in the chat for you as well. There's a section about e-learning tips and tricks in general. We've got sections for all of our products like Lectora, Scenario VR, the Asset Library, the Rockstar Learning Platform, but there's also sections on games, a section about learning development, sections on Articulate Storyline, Captivate, iSpring, PowerPoint. Lots of very good discussion there, so please join it at rockstars.elearningbrothers.com. All right, so we have fantastic guests today. We've got Josh Bledgy, one of our product managers. Thanks for joining, Josh, and taking some time out of your day, as well as Rachel Greskowiak, client marketing specialist at Biz Library. And we're very excited to hear what Rachel has to say about these company cultures. She was bragging to us that hers is so good there at Biz Library. So I'm excited to hear what you guys have to share. And without further ado, I'll turn the time over to you, Rachel and Josh.
Thanks, Andrew. So hi, everybody. My name is Rachel Greskowiak, and as Andrew said, I'm the client marketing specialist at Biz Library. So just a little bit about what I do as a client marketing specialist. I work with both our client success and our marketing team to ultimately build stronger client relationships through a variety of resources and communications. So what I do is I spend my days researching best practices and industry trends. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about company culture today, because building strong connections is something that I'm really passionate about and lucky to experience at Biz Library. And just a little bit about Biz Library. We are a leading provider of online learning for growing organizations, and we have an award-winning micro-learning video library that engages employees of all levels. Biz Library's off-the-shelf content includes a wide variety of business-critical topics that help empower organizations to solve business challenges and impact change within their organizations. Biz Library's content collection is both skill-specific and strategically designed to meet the needs of both training program administrators and employees alike.
And so I'm Josh Bledgy, so I'm product manager here at eLearning Brothers. Obviously, if you've been to our webinars before, you're familiar with what we do. But I am mainly focused on our subscription content between either courseware or asset library subscriptions and whatnot. So that's all what my responsibilities include here at eLearning Brothers. But we are very grateful for this partnership that we have with Biz Library to be able to have their content be a part of our offering here with the Rockstar Learning Platform and just on its own as well. So we're really excited to have Rachel here with us today to have this discussion, to talk about company culture from both perspective of eLearning Brothers and Biz Library's perspective as well. So we're really excited to get started here. So let's start out with just a quick poll here. We want to know how you would rate your company culture. Is it great? Does it need some improvement? Is it non-existent? Or are you just not sure how to answer that question? So just take a second to answer there. Looks like Andrew's put the poll up already for you. So just go ahead and click on the screen there.
Yep, click right on the screen. Is it great? Needs improvement? Non-existent? Not sure? Company culture? Where do you stand? A good chunk of you have participated. We'll wait about 5 more seconds. Go ahead and just click directly on the screen for the one that fits. 3, 2, 1. Okay, here's those results. So 60% of our participating audience said that their culture needs improvement. 22% said it's great. 9% said they're not sure. Maybe we need to define company culture a little bit more before they're ready to make a rating like that. And then 3% are saying that it's just non-existent.
Well, that's interesting. So most of you stand in it needs improvement, and I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are going to be as you go through what we have to discuss today, and why you would say that your company culture needs improvement. What makes it, where do you see areas that it could improve? And we'll have some more time to fill us in on that a little bit later, I think, as well. For those of you that have great company culture, good for you. We're happy that you're in companies that have a very solid experience there. For those of you that it's non-existent, hopefully we can give you some tips on how to maybe start, jumpstart your company culture within your organization from a training perspective, nothing else. There's a lot more that goes into it, which kind of brings us to where we want to start is, how do you define your company culture at your organization? So if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat there, Rachel and I are going to share a little bit of our experience, but if you wouldn't mind putting in, how you would define company culture in the chat, and Andrew's going to share a couple of those here in a moment. But Rachel, I know like we've kind of boasted about how good Biz Library is at culture, but tell us why. Tell us about it. Like what's your company culture like? How is it? We know that like this last year has changed a lot of people and changed a lot of companies. So how was it before the pandemic started, and how has it changed from then till now?
Sure. So I know when you think about culture, that can be really hard to define. And when I think about it, I think it's like trying to describe a color, right? Like, how it makes you feel, but it's kind of hard to put in words. But at Biz Library, our culture is pretty explicitly defined, and that's through a combination of our mission, vision, and core values. And the core values are really the tangible ways that we live out our culture. So we have our different mission statements, but the one that I wanted to point out is, instead of going through all of those for you, is one that we focus on is developing employees that are smart, driven, curious, and caring. So our recruiting team does a great job of trying to find culture additions who fit that statement. So we are looking for individuals who add to the culture, who are smart, driven, curious, and caring. And we really hold true to that throughout our entire employee journey. And we also have clearly defined core values. So I want to share our core values with you all. Maybe it can give you guys some ideas if your culture is non-existent, just to explain how our culture is defined at Biz Library. So our core values are build successful partnerships that last, freedom to fail, enjoy the journey, giving back, passion to be the best, respect others, and smarter every day. So those are our top 7 core values. And when you're hired on at Biz Library, you go through this immersive onboarding experience, and we call it boot camp. So it's not as scary as it sounds, but every day during boot camp, Monday through Friday of your first week, you get to know, it's all about getting to know you as a person and getting to know Biz Library. And each one of those core values is really a staple theme for each day. And when you graduate boot camp, you become a certified Bizler. So that's what everybody at Biz Library is called. We are all Bizlers. And so that's just another playful and fun way to be engaging and create that culture. And one of the things I wanted to highlight in our boot camp is our scavenger hunt. So we have this great experience where you, on your very first day, what we used to do this in person in the office, is you would go around to each person in the company, and we would have this grid of fun facts, and you would have to go find that individual that matched that fun fact. So for example, my fun fact on the grid is I like to write in calligraphy. So it not only helps you get to know a little bit about that person, but it just sparks a genuine conversation and connection, and you really start to build those connections right away. So how did that change with the pandemic? So for me, I was a new hire right before the pandemic started. So I had just started getting used to the office and start building those connections. And I was a little nervous how that was going to be as a new hire, and how that culture and the feeling I was having experienced in the office, how that was going to be present in a virtual setting. But because Biz Library has a strong company culture, and we really did not skip a beat, we just kind of shifted a little bit. So we shifted our onboarding boot camp to a virtual setting. So we do everything through Zoom meetings, and the scavenger hunt is done through video calls. And now we have a dispersed workforce across the United States here. So not everybody is located in St. Louis anymore, and so we are still making connections and getting to know each other across our dispersed workforce. But really what I want to point out is out of all the things that we do and the different ways that we were celebrating our culture through, maybe it was lunches at the office or a Secret Santa gift exchange, you can still have fun and make those connections when your people are sharing a common vision and making those connections with each other. So I'm excited to share with you guys throughout this presentation some different ways that we've made it work at Biz Library and some different tips and tricks that you guys can practice within your organization.
Cool. Awesome.
So if you guys want to hear a couple of these that came in from the audience, this person says, I'm at a university and they still don't have a work from home policy, even though thousands of us have been working from home for over a year. Another person says, we have values-based collaborative culture. Another one, our culture is kind of disconnected. The pandemic created a lot of holes. Trying to refill at the same time that we're pivoting in our strategic plan. We're redefining our culture. So, you know, this webinar can potentially help these people to really lay down an outline of what culture is and give us some ideas on how to make those changes.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Townsend, for sharing those. So from a eLearning Brothers perspective, so I view on our culture. So before you know, if I had to define what our culture is here at eLearning Brothers, it's really that we treat each other like we're family. That's been kind of the vibe that I've had from before day one. Really, it's came into when I started my hiring process here at eLearning Brothers. Is my story is a little bit unique because I got my first interview was directly with our CEO, Andrew Sibley. A friend of mine introduced us. But Andrew's a very unique individual. And I don't mean that in maybe that's sometimes used as a negative connotation, but I mean that in the most positive way possible. Because he didn't know me before I came in, and we had met once before previous to this meeting, but it was very brief. But I show up at the office, and the first thing he does is takes me around to all the departments in the office, shows me around the office, shows me the break room, introduces me to people either intentionally or just because they walk up to us. And say hi. And then he proceeds to spend about 45 minutes with me one-on-one just in an interview, which is very unique when you get that experience to sit with a high-level executive in a one-on-one setting. And by the end of the interview, he decided, yeah, I might be a good fit here. So he wanted me to meet with somebody else. And so he got me connected with them. But he also says, you know, if this doesn't work out and you're still looking for a job, I know people in the area, so let me know, and I'm happy to make some introductions, which you never see that from people. And so I felt from just that interaction made me think, okay, I really want this job. I will do whatever it takes to get this job. And it really was a good starting point for me. And that's just the vibe that we have here going forward. Is we do all the fun stuff. We have a foosball table. We play games at lunch together. We just enjoy being around each other, and we enjoy working with one another. And that's just been kind of our consistent thing. Is we enjoy each other and we work together well. We don't have as clearly defined stuff as what Biz Library has, especially since the pandemic started. As probably many of you know, shortly after the most states went to a work from home system, we acquired a couple of companies. So we acquired Trivanis, which is the company that made the Lector authoring tool, and Edulence, which is where our Rockstar learning platform came from. So last year was really us building up, integrating systematically. And so culture kind of had to take a little bit of a back burner because we were all kind of melding that together. We were doing our best to bring them in to our company culture. And I think we did a fairly decent job at that, making sure that everyone felt welcome, everyone felt like a rock star, everyone got their orange, shirts and whatnot, because that's really who we are. We're this kind of vibrant, loud organization here. And we recently acquired another company too, the Training Arcade, the game agency, which makes the Training Arcade product. And so we're in the process of integrating them into our company as well. And that's a different challenge, right? Because you're dealing with not only a dispersed workforce now that's not just here in our Utah office, but as well across the country. We have big groups of people in Florida, the Northeast, a little bit in the Pacific Northwest. And so we're trying to figure out, how do we do this? So so we have a good culture here, but we're still noticing that we have some gaps and we have some places where we can improve too. And so we're working on that. We have the same challenges I think that a lot of you face. But really, what defines a company culture? When we're saying like positive, negative, good, bad, what are we saying? So a good company culture, or one that is very positive, will provide growth opportunities and has an accessible leadership team. Like I talked about, Andrew Sibley being the first person to interview me here at eLearning Brothers. He's still very accessible to us, not maybe in that same way, but he's still there, very visible to us, walks out and says hi all the time. Same thing with the rest of our leadership team here at ELB. Another hallmark of a good culture is that your workspaces are comfortable, whether that's here at the office or when you're working from home, because now that is an extension of your office, whether we wanted it to be or not. It is now. And then there's genuine connection. There's a feeling of belonging there with that company. Obviously, a negative culture exhibits the opposite of all these things, including, like unfriendly competition, lack of flexibility, not willing to be movable and change as the organization changes. Your employees don't feel like they're autonomous. They don't feel like they have what they need to get their job done. There's also a high absentee rate, meaning that, people just don't show up and do their job. And a lot of times there's misconceptions as to what actually makes your culture good. And I just want to be kind of clear at this point that a culture is not free snacks. It's not a foosball table or a ping pong table. It's not swag. I mean, obviously I'm wearing a lot of orange right now, but that's not our culture. It's not the shirt. It's not the swag. It's the feeling that we have with one another when we're proud to wear this color and proud to wear these logos and things on our chest. And it's not, other benefits and perks. So like those things are great and they help amplify your culture and maybe are vehicles to help you get there, but that's not your culture. Like your culture needs to come down to stripping all those things away. What are those feelings and impressions that your employees have about your company today? And how does that influence how they act and how they work and everything?
Sure. Thank you for giving those definitions. And as Josh said, it goes a lot deeper than just on the surface items. So I want to give you guys some actionable steps that you can take to either define for the first time or redefine your culture if you're going through a transformation. So the first step is to align your objectives. What do you want your culture to be? What do you want that feeling to be perceived as? Align it with your organization's mission, vision, or core values, or maybe it takes time to actually create those core values if you don't have any. So for us at Biz Library, when we were in the office, we actually explicitly had our core values on a bulletin board on the walls. And so each core value had their own little bulletin board. And when you saw an individual model some behavior, you could write a note stating that what the experience was of the individual, and maybe they really showed passion to be the best. You could write down what they did and put it on that bulletin board. And so why we have that is because we want our core values to be the vehicles and really what we want to model behaviors and be intentional with our culture. Because if you're not intentional or deliberate, then your culture can kind of form accidentally, or it can just, it can just form like on its own without you guys stating what you want it to be. And so that can be harder to transform or change. So just think, what do you want your personality of your organization to be known for? So when we were in the office, we had those core values physically listed on the wall, but now that we have a dispersed workforce and we're working virtually, what we are doing new is we actually have something that's going on today, so it's really exciting. We have our core value awards. So we're having a big meeting with the whole organization, and one individual from the company gets awarded a core value award. So if you were the #1 individual to really model giving back, then you get to be rewarded and recognized in front of the entire company. So I think that's really great and special, and it rewards positive behavior. And I think that we can really give thanks to this because we have one individual, Libby, who's our Director of Talent Development and Culture, who is really dedicated to pushing and initiating these new, fun, engaging ways to show our culture. Step 2 is to involve the entire organization. So whether it's through awards or recognition, it's important to involve the entire team, from your recruiting team to leadership, making it an all-immersive experience. So having the recruiting team look for culture additions rather than culture fits can make a difference. And also starting off on the right foot by setting those expectations in your onboarding experience. And then again, having leadership reinforce those behaviors throughout. And that is one of the best ways that you can transform your culture. And step 3, and I kind of alluded to it before, is to celebrate positive behavior and recognize when your employees are exemplifying behaviors that do support your culture. Another fun way that we do this, and just more ideas for you guys to write down and try at your company, is we have our company's intranet, and we also like to shout out recognition to everybody, and we call them bravos. So that is another great way to give visibility to individuals who are doing the right thing, and we really like to celebrate that.
Yeah, we do something similar here as well. Like we have a Slack channel that's dedicated to singing praises, and it started out as this product team meeting, get together, go start putting these praises on, in the Slack channel, but it's now spread across our whole organization. It's really cool. And so this is an idea that I really enjoy, this positive feedback, this positive behavior change and reinforcement there. So we have another poll. What do you feel are your company's biggest challenges in relation to building a strong company culture? So Andrew, if you wouldn't mind putting that up on the screen, and feel free to just click. You can click multiple on this one if there is kind of 2 or 3 that fit with what your needs are. If you don't see what you want listed on here, we only listed a few. Go ahead and just tell us in the chat what other challenges you're facing as far as your culture. Some of them you've mentioned before, where there's not a work from home policy, where there's just some challenges with strategic change and whatnot. But whatever other challenges you're facing, please let us know.
That poll's open. Again, you can click right on the screen, and you can click on more than one of them. Maybe your biggest challenges is every single one of them. Go ahead and let us know. We'll give you guys about 5 more seconds. 3, 2, last chance, 1. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this won't add up to 100%, but you can definitely see those that are the highest on here. So low employee morale and poor communication are very high on this one. Second is the lack of leadership buy-in, then no clear vision, and then quite a few others, and I imagine most of the others are typing here. Here's one. Being a public sector organization, we have differing structures and leadership that don't always allow for a centralized culture. So there's one challenge. Another one, we have a strong culture in terms of all of the cohesive and team building recognition. However, the issue is getting people to work together outside of their honeycomb. So it's a team culture, but not necessarily a company culture. Okay. There's some thoughts.
Interesting. Yeah, those are all very big. Like that's interesting. The kind of the team culture versus the company culture, because you do see that a lot, right? Where it's just like the team works well cohesively together. They have a good system, but then yeah, you take that outside of that small team, and it gets a little bit more gray as you get further out. And I think even within companies that have a good culture, you'll still see that happen. Like there's the overall company culture, but I think each team has their own little perspective. But I can see how that creates a challenge when you're looking at your bigger organization as well, if that higher level culture isn't established at first. So yeah, I think we mentioned a lot of these main challenges, the poor communication, lack of leadership buy-in, and low employee morale. Those were 3 of your biggest ones there. The dispersed workforce is another challenge that we all face now. As many of you mentioned, working from home has caused some problems, some rifts maybe in your culture. I know for us here at ELB, that's created a challenge where now we're, like I said, we're not all centralized here in Utah anymore. We're spread about. And so that can get really hard to take care of. And one of the reasons for that is just because a lot of that culture used to be defined by interactions here in the office. So I actually have a quote I want to share with you. This is actually from my boss here at eLearning Brothers, Christian Weeble. He's our Chief Product Officer. In a recent presentation, he said, you know, what is culture? It's shared beliefs, it's common expectations, it's ceremonies and rituals. And these things used to be way easier to do in the office. And even before then, for a lot of people, they're still a challenge, right? It's still a challenge to find the shared beliefs. But a lot of these things are determined and reinforced by interacting with one another, by making communication open, and being able to, you know, bring everybody together. Because I think for us here at ELB, like one of the things that's always been a hallmark of our organization is, again, our leadership team is very accessible to us. We are still able to, you know, send a message to, you know, anybody that's any of our leadership team and ask them a question if we need to. I mean, we do have this expectation that you try to, you know, go up the chain of command, right? But they're still there. They're still going to answer you as best as they can, or direct you back to who should answer. But you know, our company wouldn't be what it is without that open communication. So for those of you that have that, I know that that's harder to set because sometimes you're in a middle level or a lower level position and you're trying to say, well, the leadership team should be doing this. Well, the best I can say to that is just you kind of start being that person that is open and trying to get everybody together. And then others will notice and kind of it will snowball is what I would say. But those interactions are very important. And whether that's virtually or whether that's in the office around the water cooler or the foosball table or whatever that might be for your organizational lunchroom, whatever that might be.
Yeah, and so we want to share with you guys some ways or best practices that you can keep in mind when you're trying to overcome those challenges. So whether you relate to one of those challenges or all of them, here's 4 good ways that you can support a positive culture. The first is having healthy communication. So this is a 2-part deal. So 1, we communicate with each other on a daily basis, and it's important to make sure that type of communication is healthy, to be mindful of the other people that you're talking with and confirming end times of meetings, being polite and prompt, setting expectations, you know, all of those things. Whether a conversation needs to be urgent, it needs to be an IM, or whether it can be handled in an email or a video call, all of those things are important to be mindful of. Another way is when you're talking with your coworkers and your peers and leadership to really understand the person that you're talking with. So when we are in our Biz Library bootcamp and onboarding, one of the first things we do is everybody takes a personality assessment. So there's tons of these out there, but the one that we used was called Intrinsics, and it's very simple but very accurate and helpful. So it gives you 4 colors, green, gold, orange, and blue, and each color are categories, and it gives insight to who you are, how you think, and how you like to collaborate. So for example, I'm a gold person, so that means I like order, list, organization, and my team knows that about me because this is shared not just with your team, so this is accessible to everybody in the organization. And that way they know how I work best when I collaborate. And then I also know their color as well. So when we were in the office, we had Legos. So this was such a fun physical piece to show people when it was on your desk, and you would order your colors. So I would have my gold color on top, and then green, and then orange and blue. That was the order of my colors, and it kind of explained my personality a little bit. So that was fun to have in the office and a great way to connect. But like I said, there's a lot of these personality assessments out there, and I highly recommend checking these out. Next is to build camaraderie. So this is more like a goal rather than a best practice, but just something to keep in mind. Again, find ways to stay connected to your team and even others across the organization. So again, this is for you all who have the challenge of having great team culture, but a difficult company-wide culture. So one way that we do this, and I know I'm giving you guys a ton of examples, but I'm hoping that this can spark some ideas for you and you can go back to your organization with some new ideas. But we have a mentor program at Biz Library that connects a more seasoned employee from a different department with a new hire. And so that's great because it really stretches those connections across the company, and the person who is a mentor is a good example of model behavior and can really push that culture in another way rather than just your leadership. But also your leaders are great as change champions and to model that behavior. So that is a great way to get employee buy-in across the entire organization. If your leaders are on board, that will stretch across the rest of your entire workforce. And the last is to focus on engagement. So yes, you're focusing on your day-to-day communication, like I said, beginning with healthy communication, but don't forget to have fun. That is a huge thing. We live our core values at Biz Library every day, and like I said, ours are pretty explicitly like detailed, laid out. So one of the ways we do it is giving back is one of our core values. So we have a giving back committee. We have enjoy the journey as one of our core values. So we have an enjoy the journey committee that comes up with fun ideas. They're the people involved with coming up with Secret Santa or all of those, fun events across the organization. So really the goal here is don't just have words, core values, mission just kind of plastered on a wall, but finding ways to make those words a reality is what will make a difference in your organization.
And for those of you that do, want to see more, need more statistical analysis as to why, a good company culture is essential to the organization. Maybe you have a CEO or, a higher up that is more data driven. There's plenty of studies that have shown that, building your company culture is helpful to the organization at large. From employee engagement to just profitability and productivity. But to me, I think one of the biggest stats on this slide here that I want to emphasize here is the fact that company culture is also why employees stay with an organization. A lot of times they leave because they don't feel like they're wanted or needed here, which from a training perspective is something that I know everyone is kind of involved with, because when you're onboarding or there's turnover, like you need to train them, and there's a cost associated with that. And there's always the old adage of, well, what if we train them and they leave? And well, then they left, but what if we don't train them and they stay, right? And so providing this training opportunity is really where we want to focus as we continue this presentation. And so one of the big stats here that I want to show is this: 94% of employees would stay with an organization if they felt like the organization invested in their career. And this is really where we want to go here in a minute, is to show you how you can implement a training program to be able to enhance your employee culture.
Sure, and so I don't want to go through all of these, but here's the top benefits of having a positive company culture. And so it's always important to speak to your why when you're speaking to your learners in your training program. So here's just some ways to speak to your why. Why should you care about having a positive company culture? As Josh said, 94% of employees would stay longer at a company if they invested in their career. So that's really what we want to get into here on the next slide about establishing a learning culture. So what is a learning culture? So SHRM has a great definition, and a learning culture consists of a community of workers instilled with a growth mindset. So people not only want to learn and apply what they've learned to help their organization, but they also feel compelled to share their knowledge with others. So that sharing piece is one of the biggest pieces of emphasis here in that learning culture. And that's what a growth mindset is too, when employees are always seeking out knowledge and wanting to share that with their peers. So why should you want a learning culture? So as we know, over the past year, change happens. Change is always going to happen internally and externally. Agility, change management, resilience, those are all really popular topics right now, and they're not just buzzwords. They are very important because being agile is a huge competitive advantage for organizations versus companies that are not. So having a learning culture not only improves your overall training program by having high utilization, by having learners getting into your program and participating in self-directed learning, but when you establish a culture of learning, then organizational agility will naturally follow. So let's get into how can you build a learning culture. And we can go ahead. Awesome, thank you. So how can we build that learning culture? So number one, use your training program as a tool. So you already have your training program, leverage that. And having a large content on-demand library like the Biz Library collection really gives you that option to teach and push those soft skills. So focusing on important competencies like problem solving, critical thinking, and decision making helps empower individuals and team members to make educated decisions. And also having that up-to-date training content that's available 24/7, that's very important. So having that accessible on-demand learning option that's built into your training program and your culture is going to make a huge difference. So some strategies that you can use to encourage and support learners is to be accessible and to share those resources and best practices and find ways to promote learning wherever you can. Having a central source, so having that one on-demand central place that your employees can go to for just-in-time learning is important. Finding learning gaps and finding ways where you can improve. So that is all about finding different ways to upskill and reskill your learners. And then lastly, spread, so that sharing piece, so spreading this across the organization. And again, just to emphasize, having that on-demand piece for the learning culture is big because you want your learners, your employees to go out and participate in exploratory learning and self-directed learning. And so for them to be able to have that at their fingertips and having quick micro-learning videos, similar to what we have available in our Biz Library collection, is very important. So just-in-time training, it makes it accessible. And then something I don't have on here, but we've kind of emphasized this throughout, is to still make it fun and reward positive behavior to make this a continuous pattern and not just a one-time thing.
Yeah, as we've kind of outlined already, there's different areas where you need to start training your people. There's obviously going to be some prescribed things that you need to train on, like compliance, things like that. But there's a lot of times when you'll need to just allow them to choose their own path, and we'll get into a little more of that here in a minute. But this personalization becomes super important to employees these days to be able to feel like their company cares about them and where they're going. Again, like I said, that 94% feel like they would stay longer if the company invested in their career. Well, training is a big part of that. And that reskilling and upskilling piece where they're learning skills not just for their current job, but they, as they could move up, could change departments, this upskilling idea of getting more skills so they can continue to improve. That's very important, and not just giving them the professional skills that they need, the hard skills that they'll need, but then the soft skills like Rachel was mentioning, because that's really what creates a well-rounded employee. And those are kind of the people that you want to have around. Because if you have just a good performer that does their job kind of robotically, that's nice. That gets you a lot of productivity. That gets you part of the way there. But, well, they might not know how to deal with people or whatnot. If they deal with the customer, they're a little more abrasive, things of that nature. And you want to make sure that you can give them all those skills that they need. And just some kind of stats on, what employees want from their training content. They want their managers to suggest it. They want to be told, okay, here's some suggestions for you. It's not necessarily telling you, you got to go take this, it's prescribed. It's saying, well, I found this useful. I think this would be a good skill for you to learn, telling them those kind of things. Many of them want to learn at the point of need. So if there's a task that they're performing, think about YouTube, for instance, right? Like, I'll be honest, I edit a lot of videos in my job now. And majority of the time, if I can't figure out what I need to do, within editing, I'll go first to YouTube and look for a video that tells me how to do it. You can do that with your LMS too. You could put training up there, and that could be their first source of knowledge that they need to go to for their when they're at the point of need, but that has to be available to them. There's also the idea that they want to be able to learn at their own pace. So again, don't necessarily prescribe the learning path for them, let them make their own journey and make that work. And then there's also just giving them the time to work, because time to learn, because while they're at work, they want to be able to learn then, not when they're going home. Like they don't want to, anytime that I kind of operate under the assumption that when I leave the office, or when I'm at home and I leave the office, quote unquote, that my time is my own at that point. And so if I choose to do some work stuff, that's my choice. I don't necessarily be prescribed to do that during my off hours, right? And that's what most employees seem to gravitate towards, is this idea that they want to be able to be given the time. And there's other statistics on this to show that people want to just be given the time to be able to improve their skills while they're at work, which sometimes can be difficult depending on your job, but those are very important things to think about.
Yes, and just so reiterating the importance of embracing that modern learning solution and providing your employees access to on-demand library that gives them the ability to have that self-directed learning, as Josh said, is very important. And so, for example, in the Biz Library collection, we have 7 topic areas. One of them that's very important is we have a business skills area. So some of the things that are in this topic area are health and wellness, project management, presentation and facilitation skills, time management, personal and career development. So all of those pieces can help you develop a learning culture and really support your employees and let them know, hey, we're invested in you and we care about your personal and professional development path. And especially having that health and wellness piece in there too. In the Biz Library collection, we have videos to help you support mindfulness at work or stress and anxiety. And all of those pieces are huge when it comes to making your employees feel invested in and that you care about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just again, some more, what other things do employees want from their training programs? They want to be able to have a social collaborative experience. Again, part of building a culture is building that genuine connection with each other. And a lot of that can happen through your learning program. You can, socialize and collaborativize. I don't think that's actually a word, but collaborate, build a collaborative environment for your training program. And again, like we said earlier, they want to have it personalized. And so this is a pretty cool stat, I think, from LinkedIn's 2020 Workplace Learning Report. All those previous stats, the majority of them were from the 2018 study, but this is a newer version of that study that breaks it down by the different generations. And so take a look at this chart. It's pretty interesting because you find that, no matter what generation they belong to, they want to be personalized to, really, by the vast majority. But then the social and collaborative one is interesting, just if you notice the dips where they're at. Like you would expect the baby boomer generation to maybe be less into the social and collaborative side of things just by nature, but you see the millennials are kind of a little bit lower too than some of these other organizations. And so it's really interesting to watch that and see that these stats and how these different generational learning things happen. But you're probably thinking now, okay, well, this is all well and good. Well, how exactly do I implement this within my organization? And how do I get this social aspect, this collaborative aspect, this personalized aspect? Like, this is all great, but how do I do this? Well, for us here at eLearning Brothers, we've thought about this problem a lot. And like I mentioned last year, we acquired an LMS called Knowledge Link, which we've now rebranded as the Rockstar Learning Platform. And the Rockstar Learning Platform isn't your typical LMS. It's not just a up there to track SCORM, SCORM files and track completion and whatnot. We've really built in features now that meet all these different needs, where you can socialize learning, you can collaborate on learning, you can pull in content from all sorts of different aspects, different places. Recently, actually yesterday, we launched the possibility of the feature to just link to a YouTube video that now plays within the platform and scores it, tracks completion. I used it yesterday for the first time. It is really neat to be able to just pull in these kind of informal learning things. But again, gets everything on demand. It gets them right into your hand. The nice thing about the platform too is it is mobile responsive, so it works well on a mobile device. It brings all your content to that point of need, whether they're at a computer or whether they're on, a tablet or a smartphone. So I'd encourage you to check it out. We'll provide you a link to a more full-featured demo of the platform that we did about a month and a half ago or so. We'll send you that link via the follow-up email if you're interested in learning more. But one of the other really great aspects of the platform now is we have integrated content libraries, because the technology is good, but it's a system that unless it's populated, it doesn't do anything for you. And so we've integrated with Biz Library and allow you to just use that content into these personalized learning paths. We even have a tool to assess your employees' interests and needs and skill gaps and assign them different content based off of what they're doing. And you can do that with the Biz Library courses. Those are now built in. And we are even more excited to kind of announce that we started after this partnership. We've been partners for about 6 months now, selling this content as just what's called the Biz Library Productions bundle, which is all of Biz Library's internally produced content, which is really great content and provides a lot of variety and breadth and depth. But we've expanded that now, and we're now selling what's called the full Biz Library collection, which allows you access to about 35 different content partners, if I remember correctly. Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong on that. But and also brings in, like, this adds software training to our offering and more different skills, more niche stuff as well. And so now we're able to sell that not just as these big overall libraries where you get 2,500 or 8,500, depending on if you pick the productions or the collections. We can now tailor your content down to a certain package of 200 or 50 courses as well. So if you're interested in that, feel free to get in touch with your eLearning Brothers representative and talk to them more about that. But that's really all that we have today for talking about your culture and how to establish that. We do want to emphasize these 3 steps again. So Rachel, if you wouldn't mind just briefly going over these for everybody again.
Sure. So if there's 3 main things for you guys to remember, I want you guys to walk away with these 3 items. Number 1 is align your culture with your organization's mission, vision, and values. Your people are your biggest asset, and this is one of the easiest ways to build and maintain positive company culture. Involve the entire organization. So this means from recruiting all the way from the beginning to new hires, all the way to leadership. So it's a company-wide effort. And then lastly, use your training program as a tool to build a culture of learning and respect. Make training a priority and leverage those tools that you already have.
Yeah, thanks. So we'll open up. We have a few minutes before we reach the top of the hour, but Andrew, is there any questions? I'm going to go ahead and move to this last slide here while you come back online here. For the Rockstar Learning Platform, again, if you want a demo, feel free to contact us, and we're happy to give you that. And that demo will also include the Biz Library content as well, so we can show you what that looks like, not just in the platform, but just in general as well, and how that can meet your training needs. So Andrew, is there any questions for us?
There's a lot of comments, people just continuing to add the challenges that they're facing. And I think we have a lot of people on the call that aren't in positions of leadership to the point where they can determine a company culture. Or, you can try to live a culture, but not determine it and implement a systematic program for your audience. So can you guys speak at all to how to bring this up for those that do have that sort of power?
Sure. So if you want, I can start, Josh.
Sure.
And if you're not in that position, then I think that your first priority is to really work on gaining that leadership buy-in, since it is a company-wide initiative, and that is what is going to make the biggest difference. Work on leadership buy-in. That's easier said than done. I know that can be a challenge in itself. But whenever you're trying to gain leadership buy-in, always bring it back to the why. So if you need to share some stats or examples that Josh shared, some of those statistics, those are great. So bringing it back to the why, bring it back to the numbers. you focus on how the impact of a positive company culture and how that can help you attract and retain top talent. So you can bring that to how expensive it can be for employee turnover as a separate challenge. So that would be my biggest piece of advice, is to make it a priority to gain leadership buy-in.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think that's your best route, is to go, present to your leadership team however best you feel like they would respond. Like Rachel was talking about, the personalities and whatnot, whatever their personality happens to be, to where, are they a stat-driven person? Do they need to see some hard facts to really say, okay, yeah, we need to start investing in this? Or do they work just anecdotally, say, if we don't invest in people, again, they will leave, and that cause, like, I know with leadership, if you bring it back to real dollars, they tend to start to listen a little bit more, because then that's, their bottom line, that's the company's bottom line. They want to be able to look at that and say, okay, is this a good investment or not? And really, investing in your people is one of the best things you can do from an organizational level, because they're really the reason why you're making profits at that point. So yeah, focusing on that buy-in. I think the other piece of advice I would give is, I know we talked about team culture, and some negatives that can arise around that, but I think there's definitely a lot of positives by just those that you can affect, do affect, and start building that positive culture, even if it's just your team. Because I think what will happen is then other teams will see that and they'll want to do the same thing, and the more people do that, build these little nucleuses, or maybe even like combine and merge, this idea and how they want to work with one another. Leadership can't ignore that for very long, and they'd want to make that a part of what they're doing, because they will most likely notice that they're more productive teams, they're more profitable teams, those kind of things. So.
There's a couple questions about how training can apply into this. People looking for more ideas. I wanted to reiterate something that Josh had said. So we acquired Edulance, who were the creators of Knowledge Link, a year ago, and in the last year, we have devoted a lot of our time to developing that software into the Rockstar Learning Platform. And the Rockstar Learning Platform is powerful in its communication, both ways, from the learner and the teacher. There's channels where learners can communicate back. We have learning paths where you can build these custom learning paths for people based on their needs, based on their team, and building something like that inside of your LMS, where you're saying, you can have your learning path for your team, but the entire thing is encompassed inside of the company's learning culture, or whatever you would like, wherever you want your culture to head down. There's a specific question here that says, I'm starting brand new, creating all of our training. I was brought onto the company to create our formal training, and so I have the luxury of a clean slate. What advice would you give me to get started? Here I am at the very beginning. What advice would you have as I head down this road?
I think, that's a clean slate. That's a nice place to be, because you're not bogged down by all the negative that might have been coming with legacy content. But I think the biggest thing here is, Rachel mentioned core values a lot early on there. Learn what your company's core values are, and then how your content can help enforce that. Make sure that that's kind of at the forefront of what you're doing, and what your company stands for. Whether that's you're building onboarding training, those things kind of definitely come in. But even when you're talking about compliance and things like that, the things that you have to do, those can be very helpful. I think also then sourcing your content, because I know like trying to create a whole training program from scratch is really hard. And I've started my career here at ELB building off-the-shelf courseware and whatnot, and so we had to build a huge library very quickly, which is very akin to probably what you're doing now with your clean slate here. But when you're in need of help, your easiest and fastest way to get content that's applicable to your organization is to go look for a content library like BizLibrary. And go look for those partnerships, so that way you can build out that library quickly, and then look for technology that will help you get there. And so again, the Rockstar Learning Platform is built to do that. It's built to adapt and to work for your organization as best as you need it to, and it applies all the reporting things that you need from an LMS. So look for these technology pieces and this content piece that you need to build out this organization and make the business case for it, as well as to why you would need that in order to reinforce, again, for leadership team, you want to bring it back to real dollars for them as, this is the investment, but here's the return on that. And just, focus on those things that, are important to your organization first, and then move on to, build it one step at a time, really. But if you need to do it,
it sounds like you have the power to influence the culture inclusion in there.
Yeah.
So that's a fun and challenging spot to be in.
Yeah.
One last thought before we close out here. This person wants to give some advice for leadership buy-in. I work in a big company, and we've been using Poll EV for our or Poll EV for our company meetings, allowing employees to speak their mind anonymously, and folks vote up or down. So leadership has addressed those top vote issues that are coming in anonymously, and it's been very nice, a nice outcome from COVID. So yeah, anonymous feedback is always useful. Sometimes really hard to receive, but useful. All right, so that's all the time we have for today. We'll go ahead and just remind you guys, I put a link in the chat panel to the Rockstars Learning Platform. That is inside of the Rockstar Learning Platform. You'll all have access to Biz Library and all of their awesome tools and courses. We will send a recording of this video out to everybody. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we'd love to continue this conversation on the Rockstars community. I'll put paste a link there in the chat for that as well, and we'll include a link to that in the follow-up email. And we did mention, I think there's a handout in the GoToWebinar control panel. So if you would like to download that handout, it gives a little bit more information, something that you can take and use to get buy-in and things like that. It's good, useful handout. So please download that, and we'll include that in the email as well. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Josh. This has been very, very useful. I think we all learned a little bit of something today, and we'll be able to take that into our company cultures at home or at work or wherever we may be working now. Thanks. Talk to you guys later.
Thanks, everybody.
It's been a pleasure. Bye.